Welcome back to the channel, everybody. So in this one, we're going to be reviewing one of my pull requests for a personal project that I'm working on, which actually, come to think of it, I haven't actually talked about in this channel before, but I intend to pretty soon. But I want to start with this, and I just want to walk through each file and really just walk through like what a typical code review looks like. So I have a pull request up on my project here. So let's go ahead and start with this controller class controller file here. So you can see it's message viewing controller. Here it's from controller base, which is the API controller base you use. And so if I was reading this, I'm obviously looking for dependency injection is set up correctly. It's being passed to the constructor if it's set up that way. We can see that we're getting query parameters specifically annotated as from query. The route is get messages, so the route here will be messages / get messages, and then question mark q equals, and then looks like we passed that to show queue messages, and we return the messages. So one comment I'm going to leave actually is around here, and in .NET, OK is basically just a wrapper around HTTP 200 status code. So I'm going to say refactor to use appropriate status code, and we'll just say example failed response 500. The tip not found is 404, and so on and so forth. So I would say I would put a comment on that, because you don't want to just like blanketly return a 200 if the response either failed or depending on the logic didn't process all the way through fully. So I would put a comment on that, and I also would comment here as well. And one thing I do want to call out here, so I'll put same as above for the comment, and I'll add a comment to that. One thing about code is that it's okay to be like repetitive for your comments, meaning if you see all the cases where they should be changed, whether or not it's the same change, I think you should comment on all the instances of where like you see the bug or the thing that you want changed, because sometimes if you assume that the person who makes the pull request knows about all the spots they used it, that can sometimes not be a good assumption, and it can lead to like having to go back, re-review it, and then catch that it wasn't changed in all the spots necessary. And then it just creates more administrative burden. So definitely just call it out and be explicit as you can in your comments, right? Comments are there to help people. They're not there to like, fault anybody on their code, right? That's not comments. You should be like positive in terms of like, hey, this is what I think should happen, but also offer like, help where it's needed, right? You don't want to be like, you don't want to just like say, change this, because that doesn't offer anything. So definitely try to be like available and ready to help if you do post a comment and somebody doesn't understand what you're asking them or wanting them to do. So the next ones are just basically classes that have been declared. It looks like they're just getting they just have a queue type and a stream type. Looks like they're both declared as objects, so I definitely want to keep that in mind to see like how they're using this, to see if an object type is necessary. But let's go ahead and look at this. So it looks like they just injected their services. So it looks like we do have a singleton service and a scope service. So if you ever see a singleton service registered, just make sure that the lifecycle is correct. In this case, since I was writing the code, like I know RabbitMQ service is responsible for managing the connection to RabbitMQ, which needs to be a singleton service. Other examples of singleton services you're going to find commonly with like a caching service, right? Because you only want one instance of the connection to the cache across the entire application. So if you ever see singleton, just make sure that the lifecycle is correct. Just do like a double check on that. And then it looks like that message viewing service that we were looking at. or that we will look at, is registered as a scoped service, so only one instance per request response lifecycle. Okay, those are the only changes there. Registration, other than that, registration looks good. Looks like they did add a package for RabbitMQ client, so if any NuGet package gets installed, you're going to see it in the CS proj. So it looks like the RabbitMQ client package was installed. And this looks like the interface for the message service. So it looks like they're trying to get queue messages and stream messages. It does look like they have one optional parameter. It looks like it's a nullable int that's set to null by default. So we'll see how that's being used. If there ever is, if there ever is like a lot of optional parameters, it may warrant like either breaking those, modifying the logic in some way. Or additionally, if you have a growing list of parameters like this, you may actually want to break those off into its own class and call it like, I don't know, message viewing parameters or something. I'm not going to call that out here because I think if there was like one more I would, but I'm just going to leave this as is, and that could be a future refactor. You don't want to be super nitpicky about stuff like that, because otherwise nothing would ever get done. It looks like this is the interface of the RabbitMQ service. So same thing for this as the optional offset parameter, as well as an optional limit parameter. And we'll see, it's interesting here where we have a null int, but then we have a default int set to 500. So again, we'll probably just want to keep track of how those are being used, but everything here looks good. Okay, so this is the implementation of the RabbitMQ service. Obviously, just a couple things to check is that it inherits from that declared interface. It looks like it is injecting the RabbitMQ service, which again is a singleton, so we just want to keep that in mind. And it looks like the service methods are the ones responsible for creating the cancellation token source. One thing I'll say that is, I want to call out actually here, put a comment on here, and we'll say when specifying, oh my, a cancellation token source, we should declare, or we should set a timeout value or and register, and maybe register a cancellation requested. Okay. So the reason I put this comment there is that cancellation tokens by themselves do nothing, right? They have to be acted, like they have to be canceled by something. So although we specified a cancellation token source and passed that to our method, we need to set either the cancel after value or do something, because it looks like we don't have any use of that cancellation token, although the framework is in place to do that. So this is really a small change, but just definitely something that should be changed in this PR, in my opinion. So we'll just put that comment down there as well. We'll do add single comment. So the reason is, let's say if this right here just hangs indefinitely, we should probably set a limit on how long we're allowing that RabbitMQ service method to run. So if we only want to try for, let's say, 15 seconds and then time out after that and then post a log, we can introduce that functionality into our code. So if we had, let's say, the reason I said we can maybe register a callback is really around logging. So a cancellation token, if it's been requested, we should see that propagate down all the way to our API response. But the callback is going to fire upon cancellation requested, which is going to allow us to do perhaps additional logging around why the cancellation was requested and what we can do to alleviate that in the future. So just a couple things to keep in mind when you're ever looking at it and you see the use of a cancellation token. All right, so now we're into our RabbitMQ service. It looks like we've defined a couple properties on top. So one, we have connection, the channel, and looks like we're using logger, and then the configuration. If you know anything about RabbitMQ, at least the connection to RabbitMQ, goes through connection, and then you have a channel, which is kind of like your virtual TCP connection. And those both run the best when they're long-lived, because there's a little bit of overhead, obviously, establishing that TCP connection to the server. So you want to minimize how often you're doing that, and you certainly don't want to build a connection and then close the connection every time you're trying to communicate with RabbitMQ. That wouldn't be a good experience. So you want to leave that connection open, really for the length of your application, I think, because again, according to the documentation at least, it works the best with long-lived connections. So let's see how these are being built and treated. So it looks like we have a private connect method here. It looks like we're getting configuration variables, which is good. So obviously this is something that would be a huge red flag if you ever were reviewing code and you ever saw hard-coded secrets of any kind, passwords, anything that could be sensitive. You want to avoid having any hard-coded values, especially if they're environment specific. You want to put those in the configuration or the app settings file, and then retrieved dynamically by the code. That way, when you deploy to different environments, you don't have to change the code, right? You're just going out and getting it from configuration. So definitely check that to see that that's used. It does look like we are communicating with the RabbitMQ cluster, so we have 3 ports, passing those to a list of AMQP TCP endpoints, and okay, that looks good. And here's where we're building the connection and the channel. So it looks like this method here, this connect method, is responsible for building the connection to RabbitMQ. And so it looks like we'll need to see when this is used, but it looks like the connect is being called on this get from queue method. Now this get from queue method, if you remember, was called by the message viewing service, which can be invoked anytime that endpoint's hit. And it looks like this connect will always be called. So I actually want to add a comment here because I think this might be a potential bug. And we'll say only execute the connect method when connection and channel are, we'll say, null/closed. And this is important because this is what we were talking about, long-lived. So we don't want this we don't want this to run this connect and have it go and create a connection when it's already there. So definitely a comment on there to not do that. So we only execute the connect method when connection and channel are null and closed. So that should be good. So after the connect, it looks like we go and declare the QoS value, which is the prefetch. We set that to 20, and we have it set false for global. If you have it set true for global, it's going to take effect on all your channels. And if you have it set to false, it's only going to act on this channel. So I don't know. I think we probably want to be false because I believe the stream needs a QoS of 1, so that's probably why. So this looks good. Okay, looks like we're just setting some properties. We do see a while loop. So whenever you see a while loop, you should instinctively look for what is the what is like the breaking case, right? How do we exit the loop? So it looks like we're just looping on basic get async. This basic get async, there's a little bit of knowledge you need about RabbitMQ client, but this will return a null once you consume all the messages that are available on the queue. So that's why this works. Basic get async will basically again it will return null, and we'll exit out of the loop because we say result will be null, so we'll be out. But while we are in the loop, we're going to increment counts, and then we're also going. I also checked the body too, because sometimes the body itself can be null, so we want to just make sure that, okay, if there's nothing to act on in the body which contains all the message data, then go ahead and just continue the next message, because we're not going to need to do anything. And it looks like we add the body after we encode it to UTF-8, and then we add the delivery tag to this list of delivery tags, which are unsigned longs. And then we go, once we exit the loop, we're going to actually go and knack those messages using the last delivery tag. Okay. We might want to, this may be a test, we might want to get async. We may want to add a check actually here. Here's another comment we can do. Let's add a check here. Let's say first check that there are any delivery tags available. All right. If there, and only if there are, then knack. Okay. So the reason for that comment is because I think that there's a case where we could attempt to get the delivery tags, attempt to get the messages, not get any, and the delivery tags will be empty. And then I don't know what this will do if we don't send a delivery tag up to the basic knack. So it's better to probably check delivery tags to see if there's any in that list. And then if there are, then run this. And just, talking about the project briefly, the reason I'm knacking this and requeuing as opposed to acking the messages is because I don't want this to be a destructive read on the queue. I want the messages to still be present after I read off this queue. So again, just some insight as to why that's used. So the next one is the stream connection. So RabbitMQ, you have a queue as well as a queue type of stream, and so this is a get from stream method. Takes a stream name, days, cancellation token. Looks like optional offset and a limit. So okay, so here we see we have a different prefetch value set to 1, which is required for streams. So the global setting is the correct setting for false here, as well as the other location. Oh, interesting. It looks like we are using a task completion source. So if you ever see a task completion source, it should indicate to you that there's going to be some like running, we'll call it process that has to continue, and then we'll ultimately return that task inside of this method here. So it looks like we are using the optional parameter as a way to specify what type of stream offset we want to use. It looks like if our offset is specified, we'll go ahead and specify the offset. RabbitMQ can use you can specify the offset for the stream, but you can also provide a timestamp based offset, which is what we do here. And you have to pass in Unix a Unix timestamp, and that has to be in seconds. So we're actually taking the days parameter, making it negative, and saying, hey, go and get me the messages from this many days ago and return those. So this is just a way to check that which offset style we want to use. You could argue that this could be broken out into its own method to determine that. It's up to you. I'm not going to put a comment on that, but it could be something if you want to add a unit test around this specifically. You could probably call that out as being a potential area to do that. All right, so this is our event handler here. So it looks like we have a async event for on the received async. It looks like we are getting the message, encoding it, and we're going to act the message, and we're going to write that to the console. So not a whole lot is happening here. We are adding it to our messages list. Here's where we actually declare the consumer. So you're going to want to just make sure everything is correct here. The queue, it does look like we probably... I want to add a comment here. We may want to move this out into whoops. Cancel that. We probably want to use the stream name since we've defined that here. So let's go ahead and add a comment there. We'll say change this to toilet to use the provided stream name parameter. Okay. Again, if this wasn't a parameter, I might still comment on it to say that we should probably move this into configuration. You probably you want to always look for like avoiding magic strings whenever possible, because if you have multiple instances in your code where you're using the same queue, that should tell you that you should move it into a configuration or the app settings file, because if it's used more than once, you want to reuse that in a property somewhere. So let's look at the rest of these let's look at the rest of these parameters. So we have auto act set to false. We have the that's right. Consumer specified there, cancellation token. Okay. All right, so the next bit of code here is a running task that basically monitors for the end of the stream. Now, with a stream, when you specify a custom offset, that has to be passed in arguments, and I don't believe that you can pass arguments in the basic get method. So you have to use the event handler, and because a stream is an append-only log, right? So there's not really an end, so to speak, of a stream. I mean, there is, but you have to check for, okay, when have we reached that end of the stream, right? Because a queue is a race to zero. A stream is not. The messages will always be there, and new messages can be added. Let's say when you're viewing this. So this provides us a way to say, okay, if our old count is the same after 5 seconds, then we know we've stopped. We've reached the end of our stream, or at least the window of our stream that we want to see. And then if we do that, we go ahead and cancel the operation, and then we set that task completion source to the results of the messages, which is the list of messages, which ultimately is what we are returning here. So when we return await notifier.task, what we're saying is, okay, this right here is completion notifier, or excuse me, we're going to be waiting for this to complete. I do want to add a comment here, because I think that we may, in addition to checking count, we may want to put a comment here. We may want to also add a timeout to this as well. So if we have read the stream for 15 seconds, we will always end. Okay, or we will always complete. The reason I want to do that is because I don't want to rely on just the count, because in the event of, let's say like we get a big influx of messages, and then it might just keep going, right? It presents a possibility that we never exit this while loop. So there could be arguments that we could refactor this into something a little bit cleaner. But for right now, I think I'm just going to add a timeout to this by default. I don't know what default value we will give that, but it has to be something like, whether it's 15, 30 seconds, whatever it is, that way we know, regardless of if we're still consuming messages, once it's hit that time limit, we're going to exit out, because that might indicate to us that we're trying to read too many messages. So I don't know, but that could be one argument. Now, let's get to the bottom of this file here. So everything looks good. So this is our app settings file. Obviously, I'm not gonna worry about this now, because this is just personal project. So I'm just gonna leave it in the dev right now. But I do want to look at this code, right? Because this is a fairly lengthy service, at least for right now, and there's definitely improvement for, I think, refactoring in terms of like logging and error handling and a few things. So I'm gonna scroll up to the top here and just kind of add a comment to the top here, just so we can call this out. And we'll say may want to add Okay, so I think we got through all the files that we wanted to. So you can see that we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 8 or 9 comments. So definitely, this is a lengthier, or this, I would say this is like a decent sized pull request in terms of like both complexity and also like required knowledge about the system, because some of these comments in here required some knowledge about RabbitMQ. If you didn't know about, global QoS, versus per channel QoS, you might miss you might miss a setting that should have been set or not set. You might miss the singleton registration. You might miss there's some things that you might miss. So as you kind of go through pull requests, and if you have questions about how something is being used, definitely ask somebody, because it's a good opportunity for you to learn. But also, again, it just adds another check to the code, which is not a bad thing. So you can see here a lot of pull requests is not so much about syntax as it is about the business logic, so to speak, in terms of okay, what is actually happening with the data. And it's not just about code cleanliness, right? It's not it's not just looking for ways to extract into a new method or unit tests or what have you. A lot of it is about functionality and different aspects of the system. So anyway, I hope this was helpful. I plan to make more content in general about this new project that I'm starting, which I haven't made content aside from this about yet on the channel. So I'll let you know when I get to a spot where I feel comfortable kind of introducing what this is going to be. But for right now, we're just going to keep, I think, rolling with this content. So thank you all for watching. I'll see you in the next one.